Almost done, Jet. What's cooking?
Special bell peppers and beef. Asimov Solensen. He's our next target.
Listen, Jet, this isn't bell peppers and beef.
This guy's a major player in the syndicate, operates all around the asteroids. His name's Asimov Solensen. Are you listening to me?
There's no beef.
Yes, I would.
Well, it's not!
It is when you're broke, alright?
What happened to the 1 million Wulong reward?
The repair bill for that cruiser you wrecked, and the one from that shop you trashed, and the medical bill from the cop you injured. Kill the dough!
Whatever happens, happens.
墓地で待ってる。もちろん生きた姿でな。
私は一緒には行けない。
来るな。ここからこの世界が抜け出すんだ。
そしてどうする？
どっかで自由に暮らすんです。
Alright, folks, it's Richie Rich back yet again, and yes, back with another anime review. In my last episode, I looked at Samurai Jack, which was a big series, in the early 2000s. It's one I really grew up like in my early, teens, and the show that we're going to be taking a look at today, which is Cowboy Bebop. Big anime, that came out in the late 90s, end up getting a film, got a movie in the early 2000s, and end up getting like a live action adaptation series that was on Netflix, so, as a big Samurai Jack was to me, Cowboy Bebop also. So we're gonna take a look at like the Cowboy Bebop series, we'll touch a bit about anime. What actually prompted me to do this review is Chris Stockman, is like a huge big movie TV review. I'm actually subscribed to him. He was talking about like his love for Cowboy Bebop. And I was like, that's funny. I love Cowboy Bebop too. So I wanted to give my 2 cents on what I thought of the whole Cowboy Bebop universe. Yeah, if you do love these reviews, because there's gonna be more coming along very very soon. Definitely like, comment, share, and subscribe, and also check me out on social media. My links will be in the description. And too many, it's been regarded as like one of the best pieces of anime, the storytelling, visuals, and just overall presentation of what a good anime series can be like. So like how Richie Rich got introduced to Cowboy Bebop. I watched Cowboy Bebop, like the first time I actually saw this was very late. I had no idea this came out in the late 90s. At the time, I think the biggest things I was watching, especially in the late 90s, was Dragon Ball Z and also the Pokemon. So we're talking specifically anime, and it's like as big as Dragon Ball Z was, Pokemon blew up exponentially. But I was pretty much introduced to anime from shows like Dragon Ball Z, Sailor Moon, Tenchi Neo, those ones that were appearing on my Cartoon Network. Which I started watching Cowboy Bebop, which was around 2010, in that summer of 2010. And what happened was when I had my summer and I started to go to work, I used to play Cowboy Bebop like the morning just before I would go to work. So I'd watch it just to kind of wake me up, and then I would go to do my work shit. Cowboy Bebop, what I love so much is it's one of for me, it's one of the most like adult orientated anime shows I've seen, alongside with Spawn. If you want to hear my thoughts on Spawn review, definitely go check that out. But it was so nice watching an adult anime show as an adult. I was watching it in my early 20s. So I appreciated Cowboy Bebop even then as I do now. It's where Dragon Ball Z, I was watching that when I was a kid, and Cowboy Bebop was like the adult anime, if that makes sense. It's like I really got hooked onto it. I was just like, why haven't I seen this show before? The whole idea of like bounty hunters, that like now they were on Earth and they moved to space. The influence of like Blade Runner, the sci-fi elements that got put into the series. Obviously like Cowboy Bebop is anime. It's Japanese anime. it could be considered like a neo-noir, science fiction anime. Yeah, so if you go about like, the production, when like Cowboy Bebop, began, so it was created by the animated Sunrise, which was led by production of the director Shinichirō Watanabe. Like as stated, the series works on basically like bounty hunters. But it talks about like this bounty hunter crew that is living on this spaceship, which is named Bebop. And where the cowboy name comes from is cowboy is a slang term for bounty hunter. They will use cowboy reference so many times in the show. It's like searing space cowboys, cowboy is what a bounty hunter is. The series draws a lot of inspirations from, the westerns and the noir films, especially those Sergio Leone films, when you saw like, Wanted for this month, you'll see that in this series, which is excellent. I love that drawback. And also, what I love with the series as well, it deals with like everyone has like a past. The four characters I'm going to talk about, Spike, Faye, Ed, and Jet Black. They all have these episodes specifically that ties with their past. Of like why they can't escape their past and why they are now in the present together, because they all have this similar element of not being able to move on to the characters. The main protagonist of the series is Spike Spiegel. He's this iconic space cowboy. When you're introduced to Spike in the early scenes, it shows him like dropping flowers, and what you find out is like Spike was in love with him, and because of his past like exploits, he used to work for this criminal organization called the Syndicate, and he ended up losing like the love of his life. How when you meet Spike, his demeanor and his attitude is someone who doesn't really kind of give too much of a damn about like the present or the future, because he's so stuck in the past. You'll find out that Spike actually has an artificial eye. It was Steve Blum, who has voiced other different animes. I'll make sure to put that in the edit. When you see Spike, most of the time he's only focused so much on the bounty. There's a certain thrill when like Spike is going on the bounty, as you can see in the first episode, like when he's going to chase like Asimov, Asimov Serena, with something like that kind of red eye, and it's like once like Spike actually comes there, he faces him, certain thrill, of the hunt, as certain cowboys are, and he's very skilled in like martial arts. There's scenes you'll see Spike, he's practicing his martial arts. I believe it's Jeet Kune Do, like a Bruce Lee reference. Spike pretty much is, alone, because nothing he's told too much about like, his family and history, like just a few bits up in like flashback, which is great. I love the way the flashbacks ties in and they bring it to the main story. And he just feels like he just feels like laid back, mellow guy, and I just feel he's a good protagonist. Jet Black, who is pretty much the like the godfather of the Bebop crew, and he was voiced by Bill Billingsley. He voiced Jet Black, the brother from another mother, Broski, and a relationship with Spike, kind of similar to how you see like Riggs and Murtaugh in Lethal Weapon. You will see scenes like Spike and Jet are the ones, because they were the ones in the original, before like Ed and Faye came on, they were there. There's always a common joke in the series of like Spike and Jet, like there's never any food, because most of the time they're broke, These lot are all self-employed, they make their money from the currency which is called Wulongs. Faye Valentine, who's voiced by Wendy Lee, she's someone similar to Spike, she's struggling with the past, it's told like with her, she's had like amnesia. See her like she's using like her beauty, to kind of get what she wants, and she ends up like joining them like on the ship, as a bounty hunt. And they, as I said, like not too much is explained, and that's one thing that's very significant in the series. When you are really introduced to these characters, you really start to pick up the pieces of the puzzle like later, because they do episodes which are dedicated just solely to them, and it's like you find out with Faye, like she ended up having amnesia, she forgot the past. She doesn't even know why she's here because I believe she woke up from this cryogenic sleep. And then lastly, you got Ed. So Ed who's just like it's always strange, because I thought Ed was either a boy or girl, asexual. I didn't know, So when like Ed comes, it's like super like cyber hacker, Ed is like way younger than them. Ed's probably like in his teens. He's never wearing any shoes. She's never wearing any shoes. And she's like the last like one that comes in with the dog, Ein. Ein you always see like with like Ed, always hacking, and it's like helping also them, with their journeys when they, trying to go after like the bounties. Those are the main ones. You got Spike, Jet, Faye, and you also got Ed and Ein. Cowboy Bebop, especially like if you go into the plot, Cowboy Bebop is a series that deals with a lot of genres and themes, all packed in this like, fantastic, anime series. What I love so much about it is like there's scenes in and kind of understand. So there's a lot of stuff I understood after, once you kind of understood, like, okay, this means something. There's a reason why it's there, and I think that's one thing you have to really credit to the creators of Cowboy Bebop. If we go on to the story said that the time we're given in this is 2071. So this is almost like 50 years into the future, of like where we are currently now. And at this time, humanity has now moved into basically the solar system. So this is basically like the future. Futural time, like technology is updated, and it's like the futuristic time that the directors made from what they thought how the future would be like. A lot of scenes where like most of the time the crew of Spike, Jet, Faye, and Ed and Ein, are just on the ship, on side the Bebop, waiting until like, okay, the news presents like, okay, this guy is worth, there's a bounty on like another felon, and one thing that's always cool is there's the show, which I always love, the Mexican amigo and the blonde hair girl, advertising like, okay, there's a bounty on this guy, he's gonna do it, and it's cool because that's most of the time they're lounging on the Bebop ship, waiting, for some bounty to get placed. Initially, like Spike and Jet are the first ones there, then later Faye, Ed, and Ein later coming to the ship, and Spike, who again not much is told with him in the early episode, but was like a former like hitman, the Red Dragon Syndicate, so he was in that criminal activity, and he was there with pretty much the main antagonist of at least the series, which is Vicious, who they were basically like together, basically as these like criminal hitmen. Spike ends up leaving them because of again this kind of like me kind of mixed up relationship with Spike, Vicious, and the woman that like Spike couldn't like really let go from, the one he felt like madly in love with, Julia, that end up like him getting exiled from the Red Dragon crime syndicate. So like the show pretty much like a lot of animes like Batman animated series and even Samurai Jack, which I mentioned, is it's pretty much episodic. You have episodes which are just standalone, and it can just involve like the characters on the Bebop. Even another great episode, just the opening episode, the Asteroid Blues, Spike and Jet are on the tail of catching like Asimov and Katrina. It was the girl who was pregnant and had like abscess of like I think it was the red, eyes, and certain drug that was like on the black market. Watch that scene because Spike comes in and he underestimates Asimov. He sees him as a small fry and he actually gets his ass whooped. And for him to like, come back and they have that cool battle, where Spike is wearing like the sombrero and he has that like Clint Eastwood's like the bobble, Clint Eastwood like gear on, and he's finding him like in that restaurant, and he has that smooth music that goes with it. And then you see that scene at the end where they're rushing into space, Asimov and Katrina, trying to get out, get away from Mars, get away to Mars, and she ends up shooting, the glass, that like puts all the puts them out into space, and then it was really cool, and I always love like the way Spike is, around these kind of hot figures. Season 2, like, one thing that this series did so well was the villains. It was like the Mad Period who appears in Period Le Fou. He was the basically the guy who they actually did like works on before, and he basically is this like kind of ghoulish, pale faced figure, like seen wearing this like kind of top hat, like a Victorian neck ruffle. And he's a psychotic. The first time he meets Spike, he blows up this car, right in front of him, and they engage in a battle, and Spike, he gets the best of Spike, and the only way Spike defeats him, like pretty much the end. And it's a great, battle that they have, which is in the amusement park, which basically plays off like how psychotic, the mad period is, and it's like they have like a cool scene where basically like Spike uses this kind of dagger and he gets him on the knee and is able to kind of neutralize the mad period. It's a dope episode, definitely one of the highlights of the Cowboy. Both of these episodes, these two-parters both involve Vicious, and once you see these two-parters, it also explains like how Spike and also Vicious are connected, like what they were doing before, Vicious motive in the series, and also explains like what happened with Julia. I just feel like with Vicious, the stakes is raised so much. Spike isn't as laid back as he was before. He's way more alert and he takes it more seriously. And I think it's really it's awesome because Julia only comes in like in the last part of the season, which is like the episode 25, the 25th episode. And when she comes in, she's only there for a bit. She meets up with Spike. She tells Spike, "Well, we need to run away. The syndicate's gonna catch us. We need to do all this." And she ends up, losing her life tragically. That makes Spice like even more vicious to get vicious. A bit about the soundtrack. So the soundtrack for the anime series was composed by a group called Yoko Kanno and the Seatbelts. They're a diverse band formed to create music for the series, which, as mentioned, it implements a lot of like jazz. So that music that was really like the highlight in the 1940s is a main showcase in this series. There's so many episodes that put the jazz, and it works so well with this series, like none other, and it's even just the personality of each character. Jazz music blends in well. And you also have the soundtrack. The soundtrack, once it got released in America, because that was the Japanese composers, that I mentioned, the Yoko Kanno and the Seatbelts. When it came to the America release, it was marketed by Victor Entertainment and JVC Kenwood. That was for the American releases, which still were the composers of the Japanese soundtrack. You also know it's like especially like the iconic like theme song, for the intro, the tank was also used even on the live action Netflix, which shows like the comic book, version of like Spike walking, Faye walking, then Jet, and then Ed. So the series like main characters, all interplaying, all interweave in that iconic intro. The jazz music just like kind of puts on, it's like you're watching like a super show just from the intro of the tanks. And you also, as I mentioned, I'm going to mention the movie and also the series. So to start with the movie. So when the movie came out, it was 3 years after the original series ended. So this came out 2001. It's in no shape or form like carrying on any of the elements from the original story, in the original anime series. But it does take place just before the end of Cowboy Bebop. So those last 2 episodes, occurs just before then. So just before Ed leaves the Bebop, And I honestly feel like the movie, man, as amazing as the anime series is, the movie is also top notch. Cowboy Bebop, the anime series, already had this kind of cinematic feel. So when you do see the movies, they just really expand onto it. Definitely, I do love the inclusion of the villain Vincent in that. He felt like he was perfect. Different from Vicious, of course. Different motives, different story, but he still had that sadistic, kind of sinister personality that Vicious had. You know, he's a villain. Like a lot of the Cowboy Bebop villains are like the Cowboy Bebop villains are great. But definitely when you see Vicious and Vincent, they're like the bad hombres. You know? You don't want to mess with them. And definitely when you see Spike's encounter with Vincent on the ship, you know, and also like just shout like Electra, who is like the big main inclusion into the movie. She has some history with Vincent, you know, and that scene, you know, when on the train and like, you know, Vincent like grabs Spike and just like grabs his heart and he starts bleeding, and it's like the train's going like at top speed, you know, it was amazing. And then when you go all the way to the final battle on like the top of the tower, you know, and Spike's using like his martial arts, you know, and Vincent has his own like, you know, fighting style as well, and it's like they're battling, and finally, you know, gets destroyed. You know, it's an amazing movie, you know, and it would have been cool if that was like the end, you know what I mean? Like if the series had run and the movie was going to be the end of the whole Cowboy anime, you know. But the movie is as good as the series is. The movie is that domain. Cowboy, you know, Cowboy Bebop did appear in games. You know, there's a few like Japanese releases, you know, for the PlayStation, and they had like the American releases, which were full Japanese dubbed, you know, and it's played on other platforms. But we know the Netflix series that came out in the late of 2021, which basically incorporated the episodes that were in the animated series, but they just made it live action. You know, so I'll start off with the characters in the Netflix series. You know, so for Spike Spiegel, you got John Cho. You know, if you don't know, you know, he's played in like the Howard and Kumar film. He appeared in, of course, you know, American Pie. You know, I think he was the one who coined the term MILF. He also appeared in Star Trek. You know, and I've always been a fan of John Cho. You know, what is funny about the series, Spike, you know, in the anime series, he's supposed to be like late 20s, and John Cho was like in his late 40s. You know, so it's like this 20-year difference. You know, so a lot of fans were petitioning like, you know, why is he playing this character? You know, he's way too old. But I think honestly, if he wasn't Spike, it's very difficult to find anyone who could have filled those shoes. You know, because the only one who possibly had interest and could have been a great fit for Spike would have been Keanu Reeves. You know, there's even some images such as this where you can see Keanu Reeves like in a sketch have that resemblance of Spike Spiegel. But if you're saying John Cho's too old, you know, Keanu Reeves already in his 50s, he's got his 60s, but possibly a project that he should have done way earlier. You know, so I think John Cho does splendid. You know, he really captures like that coolness and that laid back. You know, like whatever happens. You know, and he also has those cool scenes when he's kind of distraught, you know, like with the love with Julia. You know, he really shows like how much like he really cares for her, you know, and that's the reason, you know, he even has, you know, more to do. So I think Jet Black, you know, Jet Black was played by Mustafa Shakur. You know, he also played in Luke Cage. He was one of the villains, you know, and this one, man, talk about like great casting, you know. The only thing difference from Jet Black in anime and, you know, obviously the live action is, you know, just the ethnicity, but the way how he's the appearance of him, the mannerisms, you know, the way how like Jet Black is just the leader, you know, possibly like one of the best like anime to live action adaptations. You know, that was a real good casting, you know, and then he honestly, from when I seen him, I felt like he, as good as Spike was, he was good as well, you know, Jet Black, you know. Where I felt the live action series kind of did for me was when I saw what happened with other characters. So Daniela Pineda, you know, who plays Faye Valentine, who I believe she's originally Mexicano, I believe, you know, when I double check, but you know, she plays you know, Faye Valentine. The only thing I really didn't like with her, you know, because I feel like, you know, she does look like Faye. She doesn't wear too much of like, you know, the actual clothing that she has in the series. But I felt like Faye became that kind of woke character. You In the anime series, she was a strong, independent woman. She had a problem with like, guys, but she wasn't like a supreme like woke, like a feminist. You know what I mean? It felt like that in the live action series, that they were pushing it way too much to appease where we are in this current time. Because we're looking at a show that came out in the 90s, but this one coming 20 years later, things have definitely changed. So I didn't really like too much the portrayal of Faye. We're definitely going on to like also Julia. Julia in the anime series only appeared once. Near the end, she was there in flashbacks. Where Spike would confuse her for Faye. But she only appeared once, and it was nice. It was like less is more, and they gave her a whole arc. It just didn't lend to how good it was in the series. It's like she didn't have to appear more. She was part of the flashback, but they gave her this kind of strong presence role alongside, I think, who was the worst character in the series, Vicious. Vicious was just like I felt when they cast Vicious, I don't think they really studied how Vicious was an anime series. First of all, the accent was different. He didn't even have his personality. Vicious in the anime series was very, very cold. He was that cold character. He couldn't care for no one, nothing like brought him happiness. He was just cold and a sadistic guy. He killed all the syndicate and he didn't care about it. That's when he possibly character Smile. But it was a cold character. So when you see him in the live adaptation of the Netflix series, they just didn't transfer that over. It made him very weak and emasculated. And it's like when they kind of put Julia, that like she was the one who had this like the master of it all. I just didn't dig it. So this felt like the live action series. It just didn't capture the lightning in the bottle that the original anime series had. At least anime like Dragon Ball Z will always be my number one. That's why I'm gonna introduce to you. But especially when you see Cowboy Bebop, as an adult and you're older, you can understand like Watabe's direction in this. It's pretty much massive. I probably would put it a 4.75 out of 5. The good ideas with this show is like definitely Kami Watabe's direction. I think all the characters gel well together. Spike, Faye, Jet, Ed, and Ein. Definitely like the episodic way, like this is on Less is More. And also definitely the influences, from spaghetti westerns and also the sci-fi films like Blade Runner, Alien. And possibly the only bad idea possibly is like I wish there was probably more episodes and they expand, because it's only 26 episodes. When I rewatched this back on Netflix, it's like I went through it very quickly. It's like I did kind of feel like I wanted more. Even after I watched the movie, it's like I wanted more. So what I recommend this to the real true anime. So the ones that were made in Japan and they stuck to the roots. You would definitely like the show. I think all will appreciate masterful storytelling, masterful directing, and masterful character being shown in this great universe. Review on this Cowboy Bebop that ran from 1997 to 1998. If you've seen this series, you can even let me know what you felt about the Cowboy Bebop on live action series on Netflix or even the movie. Put it down in the comment section, folks. Appreciate you watching this review. And just remember, whatever happens.